Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic day and a wonderful week. Welcome to another episode of We Aren't Dead Yet. I'm Emily Armstrong, creator of the ttrpg system Quests and Quarrels, as well as the settings Beckett Build, Culinary Punk, and Elder Space. I'm here with Dazzlecat.
Hello, I am Dazzlecat. I am the creator of the ttrpg Meaty Bones, as well as the worlds of Pangorio and Hypnosium. I am here with Safa.
Hi there, my name is Safa Burnell. I'm a best-selling cyberpunk and mythpunk author and an editor for a small press. I've been in the fiction sphere for more than 15 years, and I'm going to remind everybody today, don't worry, there's always something we can do, because we aren't dead yet.
In order to get right into the action, we'll be skipping our news segment today.
All right, everybody. So this is our final episode when it comes to the special run of TTRPG one-shot creation with a rousing explanation of the job of the GM. GM stands for Game Master. This is the person running the one-shot, running the game. And we have our incredible empress of game mastery, Dazzlecat, here to take us through a bunch of stuff. Daz has, of course, decades of experience doing this and bringing people through it. Welcome back to episode 15. We've been doing this 15 times. It's incredible. If you would like to support us to continue getting content like this and content about fiction and a whole bunch of other things, please consider supporting us on Substack. That's wearen'tdeadyet.substack.com, and also on our individual Ko-fis. You can find all that information via vertimedia.ca/WADY, and also our World Anvil Worlds. More information on that everywhere that we are. So we've been on an incredible adventure together these past few episodes covering how to write one-shot TTRPG content. Today's episode is packed with valuable tips and tricks to transform you into a confident one-shot game master. We're going to discuss everything you need to know to run a smooth, engaging, and memorable one-shot adventure for your players. We're going to cover it all a little bit differently in this episode. For the most part, this is going to be Daz in just schooling us on the art of game mastery. And Emily and I are going to be interjecting with questions because this really is Daz's kettle of fish. This is Daz's true mastery, among many other skills mastered in this world. So somebody's coming to you. They've never GM'd before, and they're going to GM a one-shot. What do they need to know to dive into that trench?
It's like if me and Safa were going to GM a one-shot. I've never GM'd anything. You've never GM'd anything.
No, I haven't. I've run RPs, but I've not GM'd. There are a tiny bit of similarities. Not many, though.
Yeah, it's like the similarities between writing like fiction and or TTRPGs. Like there you can see tiny things that are the same, but there's so many things different even within those similarities.
You're both using paint. One of them's watercolor, the other's oil. At the end of the day, color gets on a canvas. Actually, that's a really good way to look at it, though, when it comes to the difference between writing stories for publication and writing TTRPG content. They're both paint. One of them's watercolor, the other's oil.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I've always viewed it, is like they're different art forms. And when you're talking different art forms, it doesn't just mean like oil paint versus crayons. Like it can be oil paint to acrylic paint. Like there's all sorts of little things, and it's the same with TTRPGs to short fiction to novels. They're all different art forms.
Absolutely. Acrylic paint, way more like short fiction, I would say, because it's water-based, it's easier to clean up, it dries faster. You know, oil paint, I'll be doing an oil painting and I'll go back to it a week later and it's still wet. Or something like watercolor, which is still pigment. It's still paint on canvas or paint on paper, most likely with watercolor. But you handle watercolor in a completely different way than you handle oils. There's different chemicals involved. There's different things you have to watch out for. When I oil paint, I wear gloves. I don't wear gloves when I watercolor because I don't need to. There's different safety things that you have to look out for, just like in GMing something and being a game master, there's a session zero. You have to kind of get into setting those expectations, something that Daz is going to talk about real soon. So I'm going to pass it over to Daz, and she's going to set our expectations for this episode and for your TTRPG GMing experience. Take it away, Dazzle Daz.
So the first thing you want to think about is the session zero moment. Even one-shots, known to just drop your players into something new, there must be a mini session addressing these points. It is very important to establish the clear expectations with your players. The GM explains the general nature of the one-shot, survival, heists, social intrigue, etc., and then asks the players what their expectations are regarding that kind of adventure. This is also the time where the pre-generated characters are presented to the players, who then get to choose them. Once characters have been chosen or made, depending on which way you guys are going, each player then expresses their expectations regarding their character. These are like, where do they expect to see their character do in this kind of nature of an adventure? Like in a heist, oh, hey, I want to be the lookout guy with this guy, or little things like that. You take that into account, and you figure out how to help them set that up, if possible. Okay, so another thing you want to do is you want to establish, how you're going to run it, the theme, and the difficulty level before the game. For instance, the difficulty level of the game is already established when the players are asked to choose or make their characters. Right then and there, that tells you what level of the game it is, because the level of the characters is the level of the game. The format, or how the one-shot will be conducted, is based on the gaming system as much as the style of the game. So you have to keep those two things in mind. Heist is a very specific and rigid format that conducts the path for the players in a fairly straight manner, while an exploration, say, of the Swamp of Doom is very open, and the players can traverse an area map at their complete discretion, as the goal is to simply still be alive at the end. Another thing regarding format is how limited their access to resources will be. This is a one-shot that isn't like, okay, we're done, we're going to go shop, and the next time we'll go. No, it's very limited in that manner.
And like a heist, that one's very specific and rigid, because usually with a heist, it's, you're setting something up, you're going to steal a specific thing, and then you're trying to get out. Like there's a format of events that are likely to happen in a heist. If you end up having a baking competition in the middle of a heist, I think you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, and heists have to be planned. You have to pick the right time to do the heist. So the whole thing has to be coordinated in a time manner. It comes with its own expectation there. And so that's something you have to point out to your players, that this is expected. Just another thing to consider is the theme. The theme is determined by how noble or grim or bright or dark the game will be. It comes as a package deal within the one shot. It needs to be adjusted based on the players, leading to this next important expectation point: the concerns of the players. The package theme of a one shot is adjustable. The GM must read through it first, if it's a published one, so they can ask the players, what do you not want to see in this adventure? By them knowing the type of adventure it is and the theme, they already have their mindset on what that could possibly be. So they're already thinking of what might be in this adventure, and they can tell you what they do not want to see within this adventure. Follow this up by asking a more direct question about a type of event that GM feels could be troubling for someone who might not have thought of that during the previous question. And then after you've asked it the second time, make a final follow-up question that's a bit more detailed about what this events could be without giving it away, to make darn sure. The rule of thumb is the darker the theme of the one-shot, the more direct the GM must be in knowing if their players are willing to play through it. And whatever parts they don't like, you have to instantly fix, take out, change, alter on the spot, no questions asked. If they don't like it, you have to change it. That's just the way it is. No matter how much work you put into it, you don't push it if your players aren't ready for it.
I think that's a very important distinction to make, because as somebody who's very new to playing TTRPGs, I don't know enough about TTRPGs to know what to say when somebody asks me, well, what don't you want? Because in order to say what don't you want, that person needs to know what potentially is on the table. And so I think it does take a GM kind of looking at their people and being like, are these people too new to know how to say no? are these people potentially too inexperienced in role playing and things like that to know kind of what, not just what to expect, but what they're allowed to say when it comes to the nature of the experience? Because it is a little bit freaky to be in there and be like, oh man, but if I say no, don't do these things, am I going to step on a whole bunch of the other players around me? They might want to do this thing and I don't. Like, so am I the odd one out? Or, am I inconveniencing people? On the flip side, am I pushing people into something they'd be uncomfortable with without realizing it? And I think that takes trust to kind of figure out, but it also takes a well-oiled GM to be able to be like, so let me prompt you here. What about this kind of thing? Oh, no way. No bugs. Oh, well, we're not playing Flockster Frenzy. I think GMs do need to prompt certain things to kind of prod people into realizing what they are and are not allowed to say, or what they can and cannot ask for.
Yeah, and there are a lot of really fantastic ways to protect not just yourself, but also your players while you're playing a one-shot and making sure everybody is on the same page. There are some really, really great resources that you can find. A quick Google search will bring you to a lot of great tools that might help you deal with some sensitive topics that you and your party might experience during your one-shot. A few of my favorites are the lines and veils. This communication tool allows players to define their boundaries. Lines mean they're hard limits on content that they are truly not comfortable with, while veils are areas they prefer to avoid but can be addressed with some sensitivity. Knowing your players' lines and veils allows you to tailor your one-shot content and navigate very sensitive topics respectfully. There's also the X card. This simple but powerful tool empowers players to signal uncomfortable conversations during the game. A player holds up an actual X card, indicating that they want to discuss something privately with the GM, potentially regarding content that crosses a line or makes them feel uncomfortable. Respecting the X card and addressing the player's concerns discreetly can ensure safe and inclusive gaming. Some like to just stick to the X card, and X means they drop the topic completely and move on. Some like to have an actual discussion and talk about what's happening and a way to move forward. There are a lot of different ways to utilize this X card method. There's also the fade to black technique. For one-shots that might involve potentially graphic violence or sexual situations that could be skipped over, consider utilizing the fade to black technique. Instead of describing those graphic details, you can narrate the scene leading up to the event and then simply fade to black and resume the narrative after the event has passed. This lets players imagine the outcome without being exposed to any of the uncomfortable details. So, when we get into running the actual one-shot after you've completed your session 0, there are a couple of strategies for keeping the game moving at a good pace. Specifically, limit the time each player has to make a decision during those encounters. While you don't want to restrict your players' agency, you want to make sure that all of your players have time to play and nobody is stealing that spotlight. If the entire one-shot is timed, you can drop hints of things going bad in the background as they take longer, and you can vary the length of descriptions told to the players. If you're in a heated moment, speak in a fast and urgent tone. Snap out details and phrases rather than full sentences, or talk slower and lean back as you describe the comforts of the inn or decadence of a palace, or even lean in for the filth in a dungeon. Another big part of maintaining momentum is dealing with distractions and stalling. No phones are to be used except for answering calls or to be set for some game mechanic, or for example, if you're using a digital software like Roll20. Encourage your players to decide what they will do while awaiting their turn rather than sitting around watching and coming up with their choices on their turn. As a player myself, I like to come up with a couple of different options before it hits my turn so that even if somebody does something unexpected, I'll hopefully be able to use one of the ideas that I came up with so that the rest of the table isn't waiting on me. And keep in mind that the last thing you say to your players will be the first thing on their minds before their turns, so be sure to end with what you want them to be focused on most. It's pretty easy to distract your players yourself, so maintaining your own focus is very important. And remember, encourage player engagement and involvement in the story. Praise every player for their decisions, good or bad, because at least they made a decision. The players who are as reluctant to jump into character are just as worthy as the players who love to be in character. And with encouragement, they'll eventually learn to come out of their shell. And one of the biggest aspects of one-shots is embracing improv. The GM is going to be playing all of the monsters, all of the villains, and all of the NPCs. So having a flexible mind is a key skill. Remember, the best laid plans of a GM never survive contact with the players. Always be ready to follow detours while working on how to get that detour leading everyone back to progressing through the adventure. Create extra encounters for all of your important NPCs. These encounters should be made so that the names and the NPCs can be altered or switched around as needed. And be prepared to make a social encounter more in depth.
So a one-shot is, in its purest form, I would say, a form of collaborative storytelling. You are collaborating between the GM, guiding the players through a story. The players are adding to that story as you go. And by the end of the experience, you're coming to create, a moment in time, a piece of narrative together, sort of as a team. Also as them being a team against your NPCs and things like that. But there's still just that sense of creating a story together.
And the final thing to remember about improv is that the essence of being a GM is having the ability to flex around choices and decisions that your players make while keeping the goal of the adventure in mind. As the GM, it's important to be able to manage player actions while keeping the overall adventure on track. Here's where phrases like no but and yes but come in handy. Saying no but allows you to gently limit a player's actions that might break the adventure's boundaries. You can then offer an alternative that keeps the story moving in a fun and interesting direction. And yes, but acknowledges the player's idea while introducing a complication or consequence. This keeps the game dynamic and prevents players from feeling like their actions have no impact. Both no but and yes but help you maintain a balance between player agency and the established storyline. Additionally, simply using but after a player's suggestion can introduce a challenge or limitation that keeps the game exciting and unpredictable.
So you've got a fantastic story brewing in your mind and you're ready to unleash your one-shot adventure on your players. But before you embark on this epic journey, let's make sure that you have what you need. Most important thing, rule books. This is the foundation of your one-shot. Have your chosen ttrpg system's rulebook readily available for quick reference. Whether it's the core rulebook for Dungeons & Dragons, Savage Worlds, or Fate, having the rules within arm reach will ensure smooth gameplay and resolve any rule clarifications that might arise during the session. I highly recommend that if you really don't want to have a big bulky rulebook, you go to the online version of this. Most of these bigger ones have it, and you can just go to D&D Beyond for Dungeons & Dragons, Archives of Nethys for Pathfinder, both first and second edition. All those are readily available and quick scrolling, so if you really need to look something up, you can just check that out, have that as well. So that way you only need it if you absolutely have to, and that's one less thing to have to carry if you have to physically travel or have it right in front of you. It doesn't hurt to have the big actual book on hand. It's always fun. Character sheets. This is where your players define their heroes. You can use pre-generated characters you've created or allow your players to build their own based on the system's character creation rules. Having character sheets ready beforehand streamlines the session and allows players to jump right into the action. This In a session 0 for a one-shot, either the players bring a character they were told that they would need to make of whatever level and within what system, or you give them the pre-gen right then. For new players, instead of having them make them on their own, like an experienced player, this is where you would guide them through the process and help them simplify it. I do recommend that a very first-time player, you create pre-gens to have on hand for them to choose from. It's a lot easier on them, so they know what they're looking at when they go to creation. When you start with creation first, you don't know what you need or how things work or what it means half the time. I highly, highly recommend the pre-gen characters.
Yeah, as a new player, having a pre-gen character that you can just throw out and be like, you are Tululalalu. There you go. She's a thief. Enjoy. Having that solves so much of the worry and the problems and the issues and just the things where you're like, well, what kind of character do you want to play? I don't know. What kind of characters are there? Oh, well, you could be a fighter, you could be this, or you could be that, or all of a sudden, by the time you get to like 7 choices, it's like, and I'm out. I have no idea what you're talking about. Pre-gen characters solve so much of that problem. It is so good for new players. I love it. Not saying new players couldn't create their own, but gosh, it helps.
Another thing you need is dice. At your table, there is always somebody who forgets to bring their dice. I will provide dice if you need it, or you can bring your own, your choice. And I have a giant cooler filled with dice for people to choose what they want to use. I also have smaller, more compartmentalized containers. I have lots and lots of dice. In fact, for Christmas, every one of my players got me 2 sets of dice. So I now have 16 more new sets of dice to add to my collection. There's never enough dice, I tell you. Anyway, you want to ensure that you have enough dice sets for all your players, especially if you're playing in a system that uses a great variety of them. For instance, Dungeons & Dragons uses a system of 7 distinct types of dice that are used from D4s all the way up to the D20. And so you want to make sure that every player has at least their own set to use during the session. If you're playing online, either they can roll from the dice they have at their desk as they play, or at the table as they play next to their computer. I recommend this, that you tell them that if they want a digital option, this is the digital option that they can use. For instance, a lot of the VTTs have built-in dice rollers in them, so you can tell them to use that, or to use a different online one that's dedicated just to dice rolling if they would prefer. Another thing is writing utensils and paper. You need to keep notes on the character sheets, and either you have an interactive digital one, which is not always available for all systems, or you provide a copy of it for the players to print out, and then they can keep track of with paper, with pencil and eraser. You do not want them to fill it out in ink, because there is a lot of erasing and marking on a character sheet. Other things you can have is you can allow them to have a notebook where they can keep notes as they play the game, because a lot of players like to take notes of what their character did and what they discovered, and they jot them down and they write them down. And yeah, that's kind of important, so you want to allow that. So they can either have the notebook app on a phone or other such things. And also, if they're too busy taking notes on their phone, they don't have time to play on it and to distract themselves away from what's going on, and thus they're more engaged in keeping focused on the game and ready to do their turns when their time comes. Another thing you want is maps and miniatures. Maps are like the blood of all games, especially now that when everybody's playing online. Everybody wants to have their little token moving on a map. So the virtual tabletops are great for displaying a map and moving your miniatures on. There's many different kinds out there. You find the one that works for you and you use that with your players. Like if you get a VTT, a virtual tabletop, it will allow your players to move their tokens on the map that you provide. And so that's a very excellent visual reference, and it's very important. If you're playing at your kitchen table, you can get the dry erase grid maps. You can get all different kinds. You can get poster maps. and then you can move the tokens on there accordingly. You can get printable maps. You can print them out, tape the sections together if you want to make a really big poster size map out of printable materials and stuff like that. There's that as well. And players love their own miniatures or tokens that they would be presented by as they play the game. So keep that in mind. There are all kinds of them that do this. For instance, they can go on Artbreeder, make an image, and then they send you the image, you use a little token maker generator, it's free online, and you makes a token and it'll pop onto any virtual tabletop, and there they have their own personal character. Do this with Hero Forge and several others that are out there as well. Another thing you want to keep in mind are handouts. They can get a mysterious treasure map that's a place with strange symbols and markings and all this other stuff. Maybe it's a coded message or a prophecy or things like that. These are really great. In a virtual environment, you usually pop them up on the screen in the place of the map so they can read it. Or what I like to do is if one person finds it and they happen to know the language, I will send them a text that already had a pre-written text. I'll send them a little image of it and they can read it on their phone secretly, and then they can play that their character discovered this and interpreted it, that type of thing. Those kind of digital handouts work really well, and it really keeps your players engaged. Another thing to keep in mind is organization. A prepared GM is a confident GM. Being organized is paramount for a successful one-shot. Pre-read your rules. Take some time to refresh your memory on the core rules and any specific variants of those rules relevant to your one-shot. Knowing them beforehand saves time during gameplay and ensures a smooth experience for everyone. This is true. Organize your notes. Clearly outline your encounters, whatever the steps within the encounters are. That never many, because it's an encounter, not a full adventure. Who are the characters involved, the NPCs, monsters, whatever stats you need should be right there on hand so you don't have to go flipping through things and looking. Note cards are excellent. Folders, and there are digital versions as well. All handy right there to use. Whatever works good for you for your organizational method, be sure to utilize it. Now, having said all this, having the necessary tools and organizing your resources effectively, the GM will confidently be prepared to guide their players through a memorable and enjoyable one-shot adventure. Now, to get more specific, there are a number of helpful websites, forums, and online tools for one-shot creation and planning. Reddit. Platforms like r/RPG and r/D&D often have dedicated communities sharing tips, resources, and even pre-made one-shot adventures. These forums are great places to ask questions, seek advice, and find inspiration from fellow GMs and players. Roll20. Not just for virtual tabletops, Roll20's forums and marketplace offer a wealth of resources, including maps, tokens, and adventure modules suitable for one-shots. Additionally, Roll20 provides tools for managing game assets, making it an invaluable resource for GMs running online games. DriveThruRPG. This is probably my all-time favorite place ever. It's a vast marketplace for RPG content, including one-shot adventures, rule supplements, and resources for game masters. With a wide variety of genres and systems represented, GMs can find everything from horror one-shots to sci-fi adventures to fantasy settings, all available for purchase or sometimes even free.
So then it is worth it for somebody who wants to get into TTRPG creation to give certain one-shots out there for free for promotional purposes, and then to kind of get higher up on the list and then have the larger things be for sale, correct?
Yes, the more sales you make, the higher up the tier you go. So you can be a gold tier by the sheer volume of people getting your free stuff, and the higher up you go in the tier, the more that they will freely advertise you on their site. And they automatically link your other things you have for sale together. So if someone says, well, I like this, do they have anything else? They just click on the creator's name and it will take them to a list of all the things that the creator has available on DriveThruRPG. I absolutely love this site. I totally love this site. There are some people who had their big started on drive-through RPG as nobodies. They just put up something free, and it just started to grow. Another site is the Alexandrian, a blog focused on RPG theory and game mastering, offering articles and tools to help GMs improve their craft, including tips specifically for running one-shots. The Alexandrian's in-depth analysis and practical advice can help GMs better understand the principles of game design and storytelling, leading to more engaging and memorable one-shot experiences, especially if you're deep into the homebrewing, which is what we call making your own adventures. Adapting a published adventure is just part of the essence of running a published adventure. It's not actually called homebrewing. You just do minor modifications to fit it wherever you need it to go. It is important to not only consume content, but also actively engage with the community by sharing your own experience, ideas, and creations. By participating in forums, social media groups, and online communities, GMs can connect with other like-minded individuals, sharing their ideas and learning from each other's experiences. Ultimately, the TTRPG community thrives on collaboration, creativity, and camaraderie.
So here we go. Here's the crux of this series that we've just done on TTRPGs. We've heard from the game master empress herself, and now it's time to take the plunge, apply all of this, and take action. A one-shot is a great way to kind of get into GMing and to decide whether or not this kind of storytelling is for you. Experiment, try out a one-shot idea. You know, whether it's your own one-shot idea or whether it's a prepackaged one that you got off of World Anvil or Drive-Thru RPG, whatever it is, wherever you got that one-shot, it is a way that you can test the waters in a really limited amount of time that doesn't have a whole lot of stakes outside of those few hours that you spent to prepare for it. Go for a small-scale one-shot. Consider running a one-shot for a smaller group of friends or even doing one yourself in a solo endeavor. This is a low-pressure environment to test your GM skills, refine your one-shot design, and gain confidence before running a game for a larger group. If I may be so bold, there's also things like Top Shelf that you can try, a Coco Craze, stuff that was really meant to be done in an hour. There are things which are kind of more chill in that environment. So if you're like, hey, I want to try it, but that seems like a lot, we got you covered. Go visit Blade and Banter. You can embrace iteration. Remember, your first one-shot will not be perfect. Just like in any creative endeavor or in any endeavor whatsoever where you are with a group of people doing a thing, it's not going to be perfect. Perfection is a fallacy. It doesn't exist. Don't worry about it. The beauty of one-shots is that they're short, self-contained, and you can learn from them and incorporate feedback from your players. Just make sure that you're actually listening to the feedback. And I know this is really difficult for me to handle sometimes, but I tend to get a little defensive at times as people who've worked with me are like, yeah, we know. So just realize that it's an instantaneous thing that is happening in front of you. You've prepared for it, yes, but there are going to be the unpreparable things that happen too. Let it happen. Let it go. The worst thing that can happen is that you didn't have as much fun as you will the next time once you figured out how to kind of make things flow. But if you followed the rules that we talked about earlier and you had a good session 0, then that is absolutely going to help with a lot of those kinds of little bumps in the road. And the more you practice, the more comfortable and confident you'll become as a GM. Just like any skill, becoming a masterful one-shot GM takes practice and dedication. The more you run one-shots, the more comfortable you'll become with them. You know, and the more comfortable you'll become with improvisation, going in and out of character, pacing, you know, developing an intuitive sense for keeping the game moving at a good clip while avoiding distractions that can bog things down. And you'll become a better storyteller. You'll hone your ability to craft compelling narratives within the confines of a one-shot, leaving your players with a memorable experience. So don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone and start running one-shot adventures. Embrace the learning process, enjoy the creativity involved, and have fun. And if you find yourself being too attached to the storyline that you want to do, potentially maybe write a short story instead. So everybody, that was our 5-episode mini-series on TTRPGs, on specifically one-shots in TTRPGs, we have gone through everything from the basic tone that you want to go for, to character building, to setting building, to encounters, to how to run the darn thing. And what we want to see now is we want to see people going out there and running their games. We want to see what kind of one-shots you create. We want to see what kinds of one-shots that you have fun with your friends playing. So make sure to let us know. You can talk to us on Substack at wearen'tdeadyet.substack.com. You can also hit us up on World Anvil, and you can hit us up on things like X. We're going to be skipping it up with a little bit more literature coming next week, where we're talking about Judge of Mystics, the next book, Book of Ruffles. It is coming out in May, and next week you guys get to hear about even more. It's going to be a jam. It's going to be great. We're going to be bopping. Looking forward to seeing you there, not only because I wrote the damn book, but because I think you're really going to enjoy it. So we're going to be doing some readings. We're going to be doing some questions. And if you have questions for me about writing myth-punk books and writing novels, and about writing both TTRPG content and novels within the same world, hit us up on X, on World Anvil, everywhere we are, on the Discord server. If you want to get involved in our Discord server, you can go to our website, vredamedia.ca/WADY, and the link is down below. And with that, all you rebels, writers, and gamers, we're wrapping up another mind-bending episode of We Aren't Dead Yet, your go-to for all things TTRPG and speculative. Stay wild, curious, and keep defying the ordinary. Until next time, hit up WADY at vredamedia.ca/WADY. That's VRAEYDAMEDIA.ca/WADY. Like and subscribe, share with your friends, check out our merch store. We'll see you next week for more news, views, and hullabaloos. So keep the fires burning, the dice rolling, and the pages turning. And remember, there's always something we can do, because we aren't dead yet.